Now, a lot of people hear storyboarding, they could picture what it is, right? And I've interviewed a lot of comic book writers, and they talk about how storyboarding is the a back and forth for them. Can you explain what that is, what the process is?
Sure. Storyboarding is pre-visualizing and drawing the show before the show gets made. So for every animated television show that you are watching, there is a roughly drawn. Well, and now it would be more roughly. There's a lot of Blender pre-visualization and stuff, 3D previs. So there's a rough version of the show that exists, whether it's drawn by hand or previs on computer. It doesn't matter. It's all the same process, just different tools. So when you watch an episode of Archer and you're watching Archer stand there and gesture with his hands and point at things, that has all been storyboarded out before it gets to what you see on the TV show. That is what we do, whether it's gestures for hands, fight scenes, drawing car chases. I spent a lot of my life,
Oh
the
yeah.
last 12 years, drawing car chases and fight scenes. So that was kind of my thing for a lot of it, and so all of that has to be boarded out. And there are totally details that are added in by animation. There's also a lot of stuff that gets cut because of money and budget, or whatever, stuff like that. Money and time. Money and time is always the huge reason stuff doesn't. But for a storyboard artist, so when you imagine, even if you are not a visual person, just imagine a stick figure version of Archer, where it's circle heads and stick bodies. We drew a little bit better than that, but at its worst, the show has to be drawn out like that. So everyone else that after us in the pipeline, which is 2D animators, character designers, background painters, 3D animators, 3D designers, 3D rigging, all that stuff. Everyone that comes after us, like. So imagine, the pipeline for is the writer, then you have the director, and then you have storyboards. It's not credited that way in television a lot, but that's how it is. Like, that is literally what it is, and it's an unfortunate It's an unfortunate thing about how people's egos work. Oftentimes storyboard artists are buried amongst other things, but storyboard artists are, and I'm going to say my controversial bit here that people yell at me and get mad about, but it's storyboard artists are co-writers and they are co-directors. It's what we do. It is literally what we do. Just because you told me, hey, make an action scene cool, doesn't mean you directed it. I have to go and make an action scene cool, and I have to board it out. I have to do the research. I have to figure it out. I have to do the camera work, and then I present it to you. And then you say, that's great, give it to the stunt team. You know what I mean? Or that's great, give it to I worked with very good directors and producers on a lot of different things. So I'm not throwing them under the bus. But what I'm saying is the people who tell you they don't use storyboard artists are often lying, or you can tell because their movies aren't any good, or their TV shows aren't that, or their TV shows are just soap opera talking heads and they don't need it. So,
Yeah.
but storyboarding at that its very, very bare base is a very rough drawn, sketchy version of the final animation that you're seeing. And fortunately, with the internet, there's so much proliferation of seeing rough boards go around now these days. You can find it pretty easily and get a pretty good example of what people are doing. And storyboards these days are way more high tech than they were even 5 years ago, let alone 12 years ago when I started out. So
Yeah. It sounds
storyboards,
like
yeah, sorry.
Well, it sounds like storyboarding is kind of the transitional phase from truly the creation into the production, right? Where things are just in the machine and need to look like this. Like, you guys storyboarders are working the most with the directors and making sure the
Yeah.
shots look right and stuff like that.
So yeah, that's actually a really good on you to acknowledge, to see that. Is that so? Like, I worked on Vampire Diaries for 3 seasons, which was season 6 through season 8, the end season. And I was listed under the art department, but I rarely talked to, if I ever even met anyone from the art department on that show.
Hmm.
I worked with directors and producers and some deep directors of photography, cinematographers, the lighting guys, the electricians. Like I worked with all them because those are the people that are like when they show up on that day to shoot it, they're looking at my boards going, this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it. They've got a plan. And I'm not saying they're shooting my boards exactly. Oftentimes they didn't. But my boards were taking what was in the script and making it an actionable item for both people on the set and people in the budget behind the scenes.